Hey guys, this is Paulo with Meditation Amsterdam. In today's video, I want to discuss one of the most common traps that we can fall into when we start to do self-cultivation work and put in the effort to stabilize our mind, our nervous system, and clear out our trauma. Before I get on with the video, my mic just broke down, and I'm curious to hear from you guys if you feel that this audio by just using the phone is good enough. So just feel free to leave a comment if you think that it's worth for me to invest in some audio repair around here. Now, this is one of those interesting ones that takes place, which is that when we start to dedicate real time on doing our cultivation practices, we start to do embodiment, we do breath work, we do shadow work, meditation, and so on, perhaps study, we see things starting to shift and change and improve for the better. And it's very often the case, something that the ego will then latch onto in order to justify being judgmental towards other people who are, between quotes, less spiritual than we are, or less dedicated to doing the cultivation work. We see them perhaps falling into habits that are clearly self-destructive, or holding attitudes that are not very constructive in general. And we tend to think to ourselves, well, these people are far less spiritual than me. And, not only that, but you start to sometimes feel annoyed or feel as if the world in its low vibration status, or whatever we want to call it, is not only annoying us, but even hampering our spiritual growth. Now, it's important to notice that the judgmental attitude towards others who are less spiritual is nothing new, in the sense that being judgmental is the default state of having or being heavily identified with our egoic mental states. It's just that when we start to put in the work and we hear about spirituality and we learn about the entire, what would you call it, discipline, or the entire endeavor, then the judgment takes the flavor of spiritual judgment against others, or in our favor. Let's put it like that. So this is a classic trap, and it just shows us that the ego will pretty much take anything to place itself above other people, or separate itself and create a separate identity for ourselves. That's its job. It's the default. Nothing to be too bothered about. When this, however, takes the shape of using others as an excuse, or calling other people a kind of limitation in our lives, something that is holding back our spiritual growth, that is actually quite interesting and quite funny, in a sense, because the relationship that we have with others is always serving as a mirror, and it is constantly reflecting back to us all the areas that we are unconscious about in ourselves. So it's well known in psychology that there is such thing as projection. The mechanism of projection is one in which something that is subconscious in us, which we don't know about ourselves, is projected onto the outside, and we react in violent or upsetting ways when certain people, when we interact with certain people, or when we are subject to certain attitudes or actions of theirs. Now, as usual, the caveat is there in saying that if someone's doing something that is annoying on a practical level, or you name it, it's okay to respond. So spirituality is not about avoiding conflict. It's actually, in fact, quite the opposite. You want to face things. The question is not so much one of whether you like someone or not. The question is whether the um, the attitude that we hold towards others and their own subconscious attitudes or violent attitudes or annoying attitudes is something that we believe either should not be happening, which is huge waste of time, or something that is in fact hampering our progress. There is no such thing as others or circumstances hampering our spiritual progress. It's in fact quite the opposite. The bigger the hurdle, the more annoyed we are with other people, the stronger that can propel our spiritual growth. So it takes time to come to understand that this is the case, actually, right? So when we are coming from an egoic point of view, people and circumstances are seen as obstacles. And when we start to shift our perspective, they start to be seen as vehicles or bridges towards part of ourselves that we don't know. You know, as they sometimes say in the little popular phrase, the obstacle is the way. But that still calls it an obstacle where what we are trying to do is retrain our mind to come and realize or notice that which we call an obstacle, which is getting in the way of us being happy, or in this case, more spiritually advanced, is in fact an apparent element of the external world with which we have failed to harmonize. And that failure to harmonize is internal, first and foremost. That's another way of saying that external obstacles present us with internal disconnections. And unfortunately, we need to train our minds to recognize this, right? So it's not very obvious. And in fact, the ego's job is to project things to the outside as opposed to help us discover them on the inside. If that was not the case, then spirituality as an endeavor wouldn't even have to exist, if we think about it, right? Animals don't do this, so they don't need this kind of discipline. But we do, right? Because the way our mind works. So when we see ourselves judging or blaming others, we want to have a little bit of clarity and a little bit of discipline. And sometimes it takes a lot of discipline, and it takes a lot of it takes a little bit of willpower, or quite a bit of persistence, let's put it like that. Maybe not willpower, but just persistence over time to try and catch ourselves out, and not to gather or let's say we don't want to benefit from the juice that we get out of judgmental attitudes or blaming others. There's a payoff there, but it's a poison chalice, right? However enticing it seems to make that division, that separation, at the end of the day, we want to come to a place where we have 100% responsibility for the way we see things and for our own state of mind and development. It's a tall order, actually, to say no to being judgmental or critical or self-righteous. It takes a lot of effort. As with everything else in spirituality, once we discover this tendency in ourselves, we need to dance with it for quite some time. And there is a period, first of all, we're completely oblivious to it. Then we come to realize that it's there, but we really enjoy the payoff of being judgmental or using others as an excuse. Then we realize that that should not be the case, and we begin to dance with the irritating situation in which we are completely clear about this, but our mind is still pulling with everything it's got in that direction, right? So this is a war of attrition, actually. It is, where does your loyalty sit to the degree that you can place your attention in the negative affects that you're trying to avoid when someone does something that you don't like. That takes a while. It takes a little bit of pointing. And often it requires help from the outside. I had someone ask me the other day, I had done work with this person in the past, and he said, well, I keep reaching out, but it's not entirely clear for me what is the job of a counselor or a coach or a spiritual teacher. And it occurred to me that apart from information about techniques and inspiration about the fact that these things work, a teacher or a counselor can act as somewhat of a cleaner mirror that can help you see things that you don't see in yourself, because we keep playing repression tricks on ourselves to not see them, right? So sometimes we reach certain impasses, and then it's good to seek help with someone who you believe can mirror back to you where those limitations sit. But there comes a point where if you start to do enough of the work and you become sincere enough and critical enough, then every single time a critical thought arises about another, or you start to use another as an excuse of why you're not already awake, or people are limiting your spiritual development or whatever, you'll catch yourself out and you'll return back towards whatever negative feelings or sense of shortcomings you are avoiding in yourself. And you come back to a now that you were trying to escape through pointing away from yourself and away from the now into excuses of one kind or another, right? So the essence of this video is one in which we find ourselves judging and making excuses for ourselves by using others and using circumstances around us. When we learn about spirituality, that takes on a spiritual flavor, and it takes discipline and sincerity, and sometimes an external unbiased observer to help reflect that back to us, where we want to essentially learn to take total accountability for our states of mind and our own development, and come to realize that others not only are not obstacles that become the way, but rather are a mirror or a bridge to a certain gap that ought to be found and healed inside, that we may essentially come to have full self-ownership and self-accountability. And ironically, that in turn creates then more harmonious relationships with people and circumstances around us. So that is the essence of today's video. It's a little bit of bread and butter, actually, right? Projection, blame, and spiritual ego are or ought to be familiar topics for anyone who's pursuing these endeavors seriously. And yet we all get still caught in those shortcomings, and it's good to mention them out loud so that we can recognize it and work on it a little bit with a bit of zeal and persistence. So that's today's thought. I'm very curious what you guys make of it, so do share that in the comments. Also, as I said, if you feel that the audio is being affected by a lack of a good mic, I'd love to hear about it. Do like, share, and subscribe if you think it's deserving, and I'll be back with more videos pretty soon. Cheerio. Bye-bye.